Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for being here. My question is for Ms. Forrest. In your article that you published in Maclean's, which you co-authored, and you say, and I quote, but our approach to alcohol regulation, which is the model that Canada's legal marijuana is copying, is similarly failing to prevent use in underage users, the exact population we are the most concerned with the marijuana will harm, end of quote. Can you expand on your thoughts? And in your opinion, are we exposing ourselves to underage use of cannabis to increase as well as it has with the alcohol?
Sure. Since the time that we wrote our article, there's been some additional details released by Health Canada about how they plan to regulate cannabis. So I'm not sure that I would still say that the approach that we're going with is most closely aligned with alcohol. I would say that it's moving, perhaps a little bit closer to tobacco. But as I sort of mentioned in my statement before, I think that there are still some loopholes that are created by the current regulations and by the Act as it currently stands.
You also mentioned in that same article you talked about the marketing done online and the lack of regulations of alcohol marketing on the internet, and where the research suggests that this marketing is normalizing binge drinking and underage drinking. With C45, the way it is right now, are we at risk to repeat the mistakes of the alcohol promotion and marketing, but for cannabis instead?
I do, yeah, I do, I have some concerns, I guess, about, I do have some concerns, I guess, about the way that the Act is written, about the ability of the industry to kind of circumvent what is in the regulations and in the Act. Personally, I do have some concerns. I think that we risk kind of creating a lot of cannabis marketing that that youth could see and that could incentivize increased consumption.
And also, from my understanding, it will be developed through closed-door regulatory process. And in your opinion, should these regulations be in the law?
Yeah, I'm not too sure how to answer that last point. I would like, honestly, to see more details. I thought that the regulatory note that came from Health Canada was a little bit light on detail about how exactly promotion and marketing was going to be regulated. And I think that there's a lot of loopholes that could be created. So I think that there are some things that you could do in the Act to kind of tighten those restrictions. I think I talked about calling for a ban on advertising in TV, on the internet, in newspapers, on the radio, but just allowing, I guess, for informational point of sale kind of marketing so that adult consumers can have access to the information that they need to make an informed choice about their cannabis consumption.
Okay, thanks. Do I still have a little bit of time?
A little bit of time.
Okay, my next question is for Professor Hammond, or it could be actually even Dr. Wang if he wants to jump in on this. I know we've already touched it. I think it was my colleague, Senator Spitaclair, if I'm not mistaken, that maybe brought it up, about the secondhand smoke and the effect of the secondhand smoke on the cannabis and youth brain development. In your professional opinion, will the secondhand smoke affect the children in the brain development? I know in New Brunswick, for an example, we have a law already in place that we should not be smoking cigarettes, just the tobacco cigarettes, in close proximity to a child. So should we be looking at this also with the cannabis, for an example, inside of a home, inside of a vehicle, or a closed-in area like that? I'd like you to expand on that just a little bit, please.
Well, let me just start by saying that there's a persistent myth that somehow cannabis smoke is less harmful because it's from natural herb. The fact is that most of the toxicants come from lighting anything on fire. It's combustion. So if I lit my tie on fire, you'd see some of the same carcinogens. So pound for pound or liter for liter, cannabis smoke is just as toxic as tobacco smoke. That's the message that people should get. Now, you don't see the same level of lung disease because cannabis smokers just don't inhale as much smoke as your average 15 cigarette a day smoker. But in terms of its potential effects to children, it's the same. You can think of it as being the same. And so consumers, municipal bylaws should not discriminate between tobacco and cannabis smoke. If we're protecting kids from smoke, that's the bottom line, and that should include tobacco and cannabis.
Yeah, and I totally agree and mirror those sentiments. I think going forward, the old marijuana compared to new marijuana and how frequently people are going to be smoking going forward, there needs to be a lot more research done on how it's going to impact youth, passive smoke exposure. But for instance, in Colorado, we actually have a kind of a little paradigm. So no one's allowed to use marijuana in public places. So where do they use it? They use it in their home. But if they use it in their home and they have children or families, they're exposing their families and their children to potentially secondhand smoke. So it's it's not as straightforward as just saying you can't do it, because then if you can't do it in private and you can't do it in public, where do you do it? But I agree. I think those are some of the concerns with passive smoke exposures.
All right, thank you.